Hey folks, Todd here. Today we're going to install the SuperPro upper control arms on our 2024 Ford F-150. The tools we'll be using for this installation are ratchets with a 17, 18, 21, and 27 millimeter socket, breaker bar and torque wrench, an 8 millimeter, 10, 11, 17, 18, and 21 millimeter ratcheting wrenches, T45 Torx bit, a pry bar, fastener removal tool, and a dead blow mallet. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, now starting off, I've got the truck already kind of up in the air, the tire off. I'm supporting this with a 2-post lift. If you're using floor jacks and jack stands, make sure you have things properly chalked in the back so it doesn't want to roll on you. So next what we're going to do is we're going to focus in right here, the nut that holds the ball joint to the spindle. We're going to go ahead and break that loose using an 18 millimeter and then pull it down a little bit, but not off all the way. All right, now with an 18 millimeter ratcheting wrench, I'm going to go ahead and loosen it up. All right, now if it is spinning, you'll use an 8 millimeter wrench to hold it steady. And you go ahead and run this down. Now this looks like it's coming right out, so the taper has already unseated. If the taper was not unseated and it was lodged in there, this nut would travel down and you have a little gap there. To get that unseated, you can either smack the side of it with a mallet, or you can just take your 8 millimeter wrench, wiggle it back and forth, and that will unseat the taper. So next what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're going to come up here, use an 18 millimeter ratcheting wrench and loosen up the 3 nuts that hold the shock tower up at the top. All right, now I'm going to also use the same 18 millimeter and go down to the bottom and loosen up the 2 nuts that hold the tower at the lower control arm. All right, now that we've got this all loosened up, I'm going to go ahead, take a floor jack and put it underneath there and support the bottom of this with a floor jack. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull this nut the rest of the way off. I've got my 18 millimeter ratchet wrench, and then I'm going to use my 8 millimeter box end wrench down here. All right, this may want to spring up, so I'm going to use a pry bar and push down on this to get a little bit of tension down so that it's a little bit better controlled. All right, let's go ahead and let that unseat. Let that ride out of the way. We're going to retain this because we're going to be reusing it for installation. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of the hardware holding the shock in or the strut. We've got the 3 18 millimeter head nuts up top and the 2 down below. And then we're going to lower the floor jack to allow this to drop down so we can work it out. I want to retain all of this hardware. Now you want to keep the hardware separated. The upper nuts are, they are not a nylock, but lower are. So keep those separated like so. All right, now we're going to go ahead and lower the floor jack to start being able to pull this guy out. Okay, now to gain a little bit of extra room, what we're going to do is we're going to start taking a couple more things loose. All right, so what we're going to do is remove this nut or this bolt right here and this bolt here. That's going to give us a lot more wiggle room with our brake lines, so we don't have to worry about stressing that. Then once we do that, we're going to go ahead and focus in on our tie rod, and we're going to break that loose, pull that off. That way we can swing all this to the side, hopefully gain a little bit more room to be able to get this strut out. And we may also need to disconnect our sway bar, but we'll get there when we'll decide that when we get there. We got our 10 millimeter. All right. I just like to put the hardware back in so we don't lose it. And we got lots more room for this to wiggle around. I am going to need to free up this back here so I can get to the nut back here anyway. So let me go ahead and grab my pry tool and pop these two fasteners out to release this, the ABS line. And I'm just going to let you guys see a little bit better what's going on back here. It's not really required to remove this in order to get this out of here, but I want you guys to see a little bit better what's going on back here. All right, we're going to use a 21 millimeter to break loose our tie rod end. All right. All right, so we're going to steady this one down here with a 10 millimeter wrench. All right, now I've got this broken loose for the tie rod end. We're going to use the 21 millimeter here and then a T45 inside this point right here. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and get the floor jack out of the way and see if we can work this out now. Okay, now to get the extra drop out of the lower control arm, to get this out, what we're going to need to do is pull out our pivot bolts for the lower control arm. So I went ahead and I marked the pivot bolts so that they can go in exactly where they need to be when we put them back in. But we're going to hold the bolt side of the pivot bolt with a 21 millimeter and the nut side with a 27 millimeter. I also went ahead and marked front and rear so I know which pivot bolt goes where in case anything gets mixed up. But let's go ahead and pull that out now. All right, now to go ahead and pull those pivot bolts out, I'm going to go ahead and put some pressure on the bottom of the lower control arm. That way I'm taking any kind of bind off of those bolts. We'll go ahead and pull those out and then drop the lower control arm down and remove the strut. All right, now we've got everything supported with the lower, with the floor jack on the lower control arm. We've got the studs pulled out from the bottom of the lower control arm. Now we're going to lift it up. Go ahead and draw the strut out. And set it to the side. Okay, next what we're going to do is if you have a level sensor that's attached to your upper control arm, you need to go ahead and take that loose right now. So we're going to use an 11 millimeter on this side to hold that still, an 8 millimeter on the nut side to get that nut off of there. All right, we're going to pull that apart. Just kind of let that hang down out of the way for right now. And next we can go ahead and work on removing our upper control arm. All right, so to take off our upper control arm, we're going to use a 21 millimeter on the nut side on the outside, and on the bolt side, it goes to the inside, it's an 18 millimeter. We're going to do that on both sides and pull those bolts out. Let's go ahead and prep the SuperPro upper control arm. Okay, now to prep these upper control arms, what we're going to do is we're first going to push out the sleeves, and then we're going to grease the area on the bushings that are going to be going in between the mounting points, and then also on the inside. So let's set this to the side here. They give us some really good grease. Tear that open. And then we can go ahead and slide the sleeve back through. All right, repeat the same on the opposite side, and then also repeat the same on the other upper control arm. All right, next we're going to put our new upper control arms where the factory one was and use the factory hardware to put it back in. Make sure the hardware goes in the same way it came out. The bolts go through from the inside to the outside. All right, next what we're going to do is go ahead and set our strut back up into place. Once we bring it up in place, we're going to put the factory hardware on top just to hold it in place. That way we can line up the lower control arm to the strut and also to the frame mounts at the bottom. So I've got someone helping me get everything lined up from underneath. We raised up the floor jack on the bottom of the lower control arm while I lined up the shock to the lower control arm. He lined up the lower control arm to the frame mounts. Now we're going to go ahead and put our factory hardware onto our shock. Right, and to hold this in place, I'm going to go ahead and line this up and set that in and put the castle nut on for right now. Now I'm going to go ahead and line up the pivot bolts. Bolt end going from the inside out, and I've already got them marked so I know which one goes where. All right. And connect the hardware. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and reassemble everything, kind of get everything back in place before I tighten everything down. So go ahead and bring my sway bar end link over. All right, that's good. All right, and if you've got the load sensor, make sure that's reconnected. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that down, holding this side with the 11 millimeter and tightening this with an 8. And we only need to bring that to like 5 foot-pounds, so just nice and snug. All right, so next what we're going to do is go ahead and tighten down our castle nut. We're going to bring it to 65 foot-pounds and then insert the pin. All right, now so for our upper control arm bolts, we're going to tighten down the factory hardware to 120 foot-pounds using a 21 millimeter on the outside and 18 millimeter on the inside. We'll get a torque wrench on that. We'll get a torque wrench on that. All right, now the lower nuts on the bottom strut, we're going to go ahead and bring that to factory torque with the 18 millimeter, and that is 45 foot-pounds. Torque wrench on those. Okay, now up at top, we're going to tighten this hardware at the top of the strut to 35 foot-pounds, also using 18 millimeter. Okay, next what we're going to do is tighten down our sway bar end link to our spindle using a 21 millimeter ratcheting wrench and then holding the the sway bar end link still with a T45. We're going to tighten that down and then come back with a torque wrench and bring that to 60 foot-pounds. Then we're going to come down here and tighten the tie rod end. You also using 21 millimeter, holding the stud still with a 10 millimeter. We're going to tighten that down and then come back with a torque wrench and bring it to 45 foot-pounds. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and button all this stuff back up. Just pop it back into place where it came out. We're going to go ahead and put the brake line brackets back in place using the 10 millimeter ratcheting wrench on both locations. Just get these nice and snug. Torque setting on those is 5 foot-pounds. All right, and next what we're going to do, using the 27 millimeter and 21 millimeter, we're going to go ahead and set those pivot bolts exactly where they need to be and tighten them down. All right, once we get them where they need to be, tightened down, we're going to go ahead and tighten them down with a torque wrench to 200 foot-pounds. Okay, we went ahead and torqued everything to spec. We want to go ahead and repeat the exact same process on the opposite side, and the next stop is the alignment shop. Well, that concludes the installation. If you have any questions, call the experts or visit us online.